Hey folks, with us today, Adi, the founder of Komment.ai. Super happy to have you on.
Thank you for having me, Nick.
Let's start with the most important thing. What does your startup do and who is it for?
Right. So Komment solves the problem of software documentation. Anyone who has had any exposure to software at any level, they know that developers hate documenting. Right? Developers get into development, especially the ones that actually like developing, right? Because of building new things, the innovation, the creativity aspect of it. No one actually likes explaining themselves, right? People do it because it's good practice, but it's like hitting the gym, right? It's you do it because you have to, right? There's only a very small minority that actually likes doing it actively, right? So it's also a muscle that you have to build, right? And I've worked in companies big and small, and I've been a developer all my life. I come from this background. I know my demographic extremely well, the psychology, the behavior of it. I've never seen a company where documentation was ever enforced harmoniously, consistently across an entire organization. Right? It has been. I've seen startups 5 people big, and companies thousands of people big. And it's a consistent problem, right? And that's something that we want to solve because there's a huge volume of code that is if you look at pre-AI hype, there's a huge volume of code that is being generated. There's the estimate is there's 93 billion lines of code being written every single year. And that's before auto code assistant, right? So with those, it's gonna blow up, right? It's not 93 billion lines of code overall. It's every single year, right? And it's going up. And now there's going to be an exponential curve where all these coding assistants are going to just add to it, right? And somebody's got to explain it at some point. At some point, people are going to take a breather from getting all of it and say, okay, well, somebody has to explain this, right? That's where something like Komment comes into play, right? We help explain software at a range of technical documentation abstractions. So think about in-code comments, file level comments, readmes, architecture diagrams, dependency graphs, usage patterns, API docs, user API setup guides, all of it done automatically for you, right? So your developers can just focus on building and creating the features. So that's what Komment does.
Love that. And I mean, you had a dream job before. I mean, you were a dev at AWS at Amazon, which is like a dream job for like most developers. Why did you make the decision, or how did you make the decision to make the jump and become a founder?
Right. So, I can't be more grateful for the opportunities I had at Amazon also before then, right? For a brief stint, I was also an executive product manager at Canonical, which does Ubuntu, right? So at Amazon, I was doing robotics and AI, and you're right? I was in a this skunkworks team, very agile team called prototyping, where you're just coming in with somebody comes to you with ideas that don't have a tutorial, right? They don't know what the answer is, right? It's not just somebody can go in and figure out, well, just implement this, right? You have to figure it out yourself, right? Sometimes that means doing your own stuff. So you invent your own stuff and then you get patents for it. Sometimes it means you're reading academic literature and then bringing that into technology. And then also doing it in a very fast pace, because the average length of our prototypes was 6 weeks, from like somebody coming to you to you delivering a working prototype, right? So I was almost trained, or my whole team was trained in a way so that you're delivering extremely fast, right? So it's 6 weeks, right? So you need to manage your time and work packages very effectively. So you're right. It was an extremely nice job, and this particular problem was something that had been a side project of mine for several years, and I just did not see anyone take a stab at it, right? Initially, when I started doing it, it was because I was working for a company that had tens of thousands of C firmware code, right? I was working for a sensor startup, so they had built their sensor, and there was so much C code there. And C, if you know, right, it's not as legible as Python or maybe even JavaScript, like some of the modern languages like Ruby, right? And none of it was documented. So we couldn't do anything of it, right? So I was trying to find, like, is there a service? Is there a solution? Is there something I can use to retroactively document? And there was nothing out there. So that's when I started just building things on the side that maybe I can do something which might bring help, which might help the company, right? So it had been a side project, and with everything that was going on in the AI landscape, I still didn't see, I think that everyone in the hype cycle, which is typical of hype cycles, they were missing something crucial, right? Which is, yes, you have all the coding assistants, all the, chatbots writing haiku for you. But what is a set of tools that will actually solve a real problem that is important for a big enough customer, right? And so, documentation was really one of the answers that I came up with. And lo and behold, amongst all my side projects, that was one of the things. And then somebody offered me a large amount of money to start a company.
I mean, I have to dig deeper on the last part of the sentence that you just mentioned. Like,
I should have started with that. I started with that.
Tell us a bit about like the funding you got and like how you. I mean, you're only 8 months in, so it's like all like super fresh. So like how you initially got it off the ground.
Right. So one of the biggest assets you will have, and I know it's so cliche, but one of the biggest assets you will have is your network, right? Now, before Germany, I'm based in Germany right now. Before this, I was in Silicon Valley. I went to Stanford, and that, I don't want to say network because it just feels so commoditized. So let me say relationships, right? So I had strong friendships and strong relationships in Silicon Valley with Stanford connections, with also other folks who have founded their own companies, right? Essentially, there was a path through those relationships into introductions with VCs. Also, other VCs that I already know because maybe in the past I have helped consult them on some investment they were doing, not to expect something in return, but just, okay, it's my area of expertise, robotics, for instance, right? So I'll help you, right? So, you can knock on their door because, now, you've built a relationship with them. So, and you accumulate that. You can't just go to a networking event and exchange business cards and have that relationship, right? Where people are vouching for you when you are not in the room, right? When there's two people who are talking about you and both of them are saying, okay, this is a good idea, right? When you cannot influence the conversation, and that cannot happen through a single conversation. So, I would say that is really how I did it, right? So when Komment got funded, there was no prototype, there was no team, there was no slide deck, there was nothing, right? It was just people talking. But more than that, people talking because you'll have a bunch of star-studded, charismatic people who love to talk and impress people. The Dale Carnegie principles and all that, right? But ultimately, what you need are people who will vouch for you in front of others when you are not in the room, right? And I think that's really what helped me and what helped Komment. And even to this day, we have an incredible relationship with our investors as well. Other things as well. But we take care of those relationships, right? We don't just ghost people. We keep them up to date at a reasonable level, right? So there is a balance you have to strike. But it won't be too far for me to say that our investors love us.
Amazing.
If you need to hire the right developers and ship fast, then React Squad is for you. A boutique agency that specializes in React and only works with fast growth startups. Visit reactsquad.io to learn more.
And I mean, then who's working the company right now? So like, it's of course you as the founder, and then what's the team like?
Yeah, so there's 6 of us now. Right, so we have come a long way since my initial thing, and that's not to say that I've only hired the 6 people that are working, right, or 5 people apart from me that are working in Komment. I had many more, right? I don't have 100% run rate, right? So what we have is about a 40-50% run rate with the success of candidates, right? In terms of people coming in and are they exactly fitting? I don't want to say culture because it's such an overused trope, but they are fitting in the work methodology that makes Komment successful. Right. And there's some guiding principles across which I hire. 6 of them have, so far passed that filter, I would say. Right. So I started Komment as a solo founder, and I'm still a solo founder, and I will be a solo founder, but in no way is Komment a one-man army. Right. So there are so many aspects of Komment that are almost, I've delegated entirely over the course. You can't just do it overnight, right? Over the course of several months to certain senior individuals, and all of them have there's one thing that's common across everyone who works in my team. It is that they take absolute ownership of everything going on in the company, right? It's never I was hired for this, so I won't do this, right? Right. If you're hired as an engineer and I need a blog post, you will, they write it, right? If there's a fire in production, there's been as a small company, as an MVP, as a beta company, right? So our product is still in beta, right? Inevitably there will be fires in production, right? Even Facebook goes down, come on, right? Like, so it's not uncommon, right? So it has happened a few times, I would say, right? Maybe about 4 or 5 times in the last several months, which already is pretty good, I would say. But there hasn't, and sometimes those happen on weekends, or sometimes they happen at nights, right? There hasn't been a single time when I have had to go and chase somebody and say, go fix this. They're already on it. By the time I'm logged in, they've already received the alarms. A couple of them are already on it, which is why I say, right, it's not a one-man army, because I cannot always be available 24/7, 365 days a year.
Do you feel like that is the differentiator between the 6 people that are like in the team right now compared to the 3 people that didn't work out? Or like, what do you think is the difference of someone who works out and someone who doesn't?
Right. So I think there's 3 aspects per se which makes somebody successful in any company, right? And then we can talk about Komment specifically. One is, do you have the technical acumen to do what needs to be done, right? What we are solving, these are very complex problems, right? If you want to take the human effectively out of the loop for something like software documentation, which is extremely opinionated, which is, there's so many modalities to it. There's so many ways of working, right, in a multiplayer Git setup, right? And if you're trying to effectively do that, you need to index heavily on algorithms, and some of those algorithms can be neural networks, right? But heuristics, algorithms, look at the bleeding edge, implement them, figure out what is a solution for something that hasn't been solved yet. We're not just copying a product, right? We are innovating a lot. So do you have the technical acumen to do that, right? Because without that, it's non-starter. The second is the work ethic, right? Do you have the discipline to work together as a team, right? Do you have the humility to ask for guidance and accept feedback, right? Because when we are communicating with each other, sometimes people are taken aback when they join Komment, right? They're taken aback by how abrupt we are with both positive and negative things, right? Which is, we don't have the time as a small startup to tiptoe around each other, right? With political correctness, right? We are extremely direct with our communication, and that goes for me as well, right? There have been team calls where a junior developer, for instance, has corrected me, and there's no ego anywhere, right? It is just what it is, right? And it takes some time to build that culture, but also there's a certain baseline level of personality that accepts that, right? That doesn't take feedback personally, that doesn't take questions personally, right? Mostly when I ask questions like, why are you doing this? I'm asking because I don't know the answer, like I'm educating myself, right? But you can also take it as like, are you questioning my expertise or my experience, right? So it's a way of interpretation. So that's the second part, which is, the work ethic, the discipline, the humility, the ability to work together cohesively in a team. And the third, which is, not really under people's control, is, life circumstances, right? So sometimes it's just not the right circumstance in your life, right? For instance, like when I started Komment, there's really only 2 people that I did not want to be a solo founder, right? I'm almost thrust into it, and then I took up the challenge, right? There's only 2 people that I would have considered as a founder, as a co-founder, right? One of them is a very close friend that I've known for 15 something years. We both went to Stanford together, but he already had his own startup, right? So and his startup is Series A, so he's like several steps ahead of me in terms of Komment, right? So he started it a few years ago, and so of course that doesn't make sense, but he invested in me, so that's something, right? And the second person was a very close friend of mine, who I worked together also in Munich, but she was pregnant at the time that I was starting the company, and it was just 2 months. So that's what I mean by the life circumstances, right? Sometimes it's just not the right timing. But she also invested, by the way, right? So the ones who could not join invested, and the ones who joined, they're on for the ride.
Love that. I mean, so you were looking for co-founders and got angels. It's like not too bad.
Yeah.
You mentioned one thing before we started recording, which is modalities of help you can get as a founder. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Right. So when I say, Komment is not a solo founder, and when I see VCs talk about how reticent they are about funding solo founders, a part of me understands. I think it's a little myopic to be dismissing them off the bat, but it's a little myopic to say, oh, our model says that only 2 people or more can create a successful startup, right? So but they're right in the sense that one person cannot do anything, right? Do everything, right? They can do something. They can get the train started, but they can't do the whole thing themselves, right? So you need to build a network of support around you, right? Now, what are these network of support, right? Your employees, your colleagues are your biggest network of support because they're kind of like you're surrounded by them all the time, right? You're working together on solving a problem. And oftentimes when I sometimes get demotivated, and I'm human, right? Sometimes I get demotivated as well, especially journey as a solo founder, it can be incredibly lonely, right? But I take inspiration from the motivation and the enthusiasm that my team brings to the table, right? They are equally enthused about how we are solving, this really critical problem in a very informed and disciplined way. Right? They love working, right? They're having, as much as they're working, they love working as well, right? They love working on it as well. So I never have to drive anyone. So that's, your colleagues is one modality. Your friends and family, obviously another, right? On whom you can lean on if you're having a good day, you have good news to share, you're having a bad day, or you need help, you need just a sounding board, a sparring partner. Usually a co-founder would do that, for instance, right? Your customers, right? If you have loyal customers, good customers, they can also be, they will try to help you, right? Our customers have helped us a few times as well, right? At least the way, and the way Komment is designed and the way Komment is run, we are very sensitive to customer feedback, right? So especially the right, if it's the right profile, we are very sensitive to that feedback. So if they say like, this is just not working, I don't get it, we listen to it and we work on that, and that's help, right? And if they say, oh, I love it, this just does exactly what I expected to, we take that to heart as well, right? So that is another way of support, right? Investors, of course, will also support you, right? Different parties, different funds to a different extent, also depends on the relationship. And others in your network as well, right? But what I've seen, and I think you are going to take this conversation there, right? Which is, the most help that I've found, the most actionable, tactical aha moments where I'm like, I never thought of that, right? Or it would have taken me so long to figure that out. Like, thanks for telling me that, right? Are other founders, and especially not just other founders, but other founders who are maybe just 1 or 2 steps ahead in their company progress, right? Because their memory is fresh and they have the privilege of retrospective, of reflection, right? Of what I could have done better, what I could have not done better. And, it's, since it's fresh in them, it's almost raw, right? They're willing to just like talk about it. Instead of something that they've, processed and tabled, right? So, there's been so many founders that I've spoken with who are, and then a lot of these introductions again come from people and then people who think somebody else might be helpful. Has come from really, other founders. In this case, we're working on dev tools, SaaS, other SaaS founders who are in their seed stage or in their Series A stage. And it's an incredible amount of tactical guidance that you cannot get in a guide. You're not going to get in a book. They're going to look at exactly how you are doing, what you're doing. It's going to be very penetrating questions. And then, but then they're going to give you very concrete answers as well, right? Like in this particular situation, this is what you should be doing, or this is what I would do, right? So yeah, you do have to bank on all this help because, one man cannot drive the entire battle, get into battle.
What was the last challenge that you faced as a founder where you made use of that?
So, currently, what we are doing is, the last couple of quarters, we've focused on building out a core team, building out the product, building out an MVP, get some initial customers, and currently we are in this phase where we are starting to ramp up a more of a sales engine. Right? It's going to take some time, but we have started that process about a month ago, and then it's slowly being ramped up. And I come from a very technical background, right? I can speak passionately about my product, but that doesn't mean that I can lead a sales cycle, right? Sometimes it almost backfires because I speak so much about the product, I don't give a customer a chance to ask me questions, right? So that's something where I've leaned on a lot of people in the last couple of months. And something which would be very basic for them, right? Like, what's a tech stack? What tech stack? What's an optimal tech stack for a company our size to do what we are trying to do with our volume, right? And they would, instead of you trying out 10 tools, they would just tell you, like, just do this, right? Like, I don't know, use Apollo, then put it in play, then do like, some Mailgun stuff, and that's it, right? Like, they'll just tell you, right? And it saves you time, right? And in this stage, where there's very few people, like single digit number of people, that time is super critical, right? You only get so many shots, right? Maybe as a Series A, Series B, and more mature company, you get many shots. But as a pre-seed seed company, right, you get only very limited number of shots, and you want to maximize that. And what I've seen is the other side of it is also important, right? Like, how willing are people? How willing are people? Are people to give that help that you've asked, right? And I've seen that there hasn't been a chance. There hasn't been a time. I have never experienced a time where I've reached out to somebody, very, in a humble, friendly way, and said, like, I need help with this. Do you think you could, spend some time and just tell me what you're thinking, right? It's happening with customers as well, but all right, like, I know something is not working. Do you think you can give me some time? I just really want to understand what's happening, right? I think when you actually ask people for help in the right manner, people are, for the most part, more than willing to give you that help, right? So, and I index on that a lot.
I think that's super right. Being humble and just treating people like humans and not just super transactional is just takes
you're not creating so far. Your who knows what, like, so yeah, I think if folks would focus on relationships rather than network, right, it's really the biggest asset you can have, especially as a founder.
I mean, we're recording this, we just crossed like Q2 of 24. The funding environment is still like not back to the boom, but it's like slowly getting better. So a very tactical question. You raised in roughly around September 23. How much runway did you roughly plan when raising that pre-seed round? Like, how do you, like, because you have, like, let's just say, like, the network of people in Silicon Valley, so you can grab that expertise on, like, okay, on planning funding rounds, because in the end, even the best product, if you run out of money before you can get traction, then it's gone.
You're right. Yeah, totally. So I planned for 18 months, and I was able to get that 18 months. And then, but eventually, the whole amount ended up being a little higher than that, because we got a lot of interest from investors. So what I tell folks is, we said no to almost as many investors as the one that said no to us, right? Which is, when you're fundraising, and I'm also learning on the fly, so I don't pontificate in any way, but I'm just sharing what I've learned, right? Which is, when you're fundraising, you also want to you don't want to just take money for the sake, because somebody's willing to write you a check, right? There's checks worth 800,000 that we've said no to, right? And smaller checks, bigger checks, we have said no to them because it wasn't the right fund to partner with, right? It wasn't the right time. Right. Sometimes it's not about the what they bring, the qualities they bring, but the circumstances. Right. We don't have any room. Right. Because there's only, my mental model for fundraising is, yes, you're absolutely right about you need to look at your burn rate, what your next goals are, what the runway is. But I think in a broader sense, responsible fundraising is also about understanding that there's only 100% of the company to give away. Right. And there's a hard limit. That 100 never becomes 110, right? Of course, you can dilute it and all that, then you can see how that works. But, you want to take care of the ones who came in early, right? You want to take care of the employees as well. You want to obviously take care of yourself as well, right? So, there's a certain amount of responsible fundraising. So when we received a lot of interest post our initial raise, which was for this 18-month period, we allowed a couple of parties to join in who were extremely strategic, and they've proven their worth, right? I'm so blessed that we made room for them and we allowed them in, because they've been really pulling their weight. They've been extremely helpful, extremely willing to help, and yeah, it's just a joy to work with them. So then we went from 1 million to 1.3 million based on that. So then that gave me about 2 years of runway. I think for a pre-seed startup, you don't really need a 2-year runway, right? If you're pulling the right levers, if you're building something that's a painkiller, a year, you should be able to prove those things in the first year, right? And what you're trying to prove is not revenue, but early signs of traction. Now, early signs of traction could be revenue, but it need not be revenue. It could be something else as well, right? It could be a metric around user, if you're running a B2C thing, right? It could be users. It could be paying users. It could be, paying users is revenue. It could be the stickiness, right? It could be, I'm not making a single cent, but my users spend 2 hours on my website, right? One of the golden nuggets of wisdom I got, again, from a founder, was in your pre-seed stage, and when you're raising for pre-seed, when you're raising for seed, pre-product market fit, right? Because product market fit brings in revenue numbers into play, right? But pre-product market fit, you will be judged on the metric that you allow yourself to be judged on, right? So if you go on in investor conversation and say revenue is our metric, then that is what they're going to listen to, right? If you go and say, enterprise pilots is our metric, then that's what they're going to listen to. If you say user stickiness is whatever, right? It can be super, in the absence of revenue, you are free to make that choice at this point of time, as long as it is something that is easily graspable, right? If you come up with like a super contrived mechanism, it's something that you get, like, for instance, like with Komment, I can give you an example, right? Our North Star metric is lines of code commented, right? We document code. And, as of this month, we've documented more than 250,000 lines of code, right? And it's, our metrics are going in the right direction, and we are still in beta. We are just about, 6 months old with that product. So, and we are still building, right? There's still fires that we are dealing with, but it's already been used in 250,000 lines of code, right? Now, when I say that, it's much more impressive than me saying, yeah, and like the revenue is like, we have some revenue, but like it's this, and then I'm apologetic about it, right? You want to talk about a metric that you can proudly share, and then people can understand it very quickly. When I say lines of code, whether you're a coder or not, you understand what I mean, right? So, yeah.
Love that. I mean, we're coming close to time, but as a final question, if we would meet again in 5 years on that pod here, what's the story about Komment that you then want to share with me? Like, what does your life look like? What does the company look like?
That's fascinating. Well, I have a product vision, right? And the vision of product is to become, of Komment is to become this end-to-end documentation engine that documents the internet, basically, right? In fact, I was looking at a video just today about somebody posting on YouTube why I don't use Copilot anymore. And, one of the things he mentioned, and I made a LinkedIn post about it, you try to read it, was his quote was something around the lines of, Copilot gives me outdated suggestions because it has been trained on outdated documentation, right? So one of the things people will realize is that to use these coding assistants, you need to continuously train them on the latest documentation, which means the latest documentation has to be written, right? So, and that's where something like Komment comes into play, right? So all these 93 billion lines of code per year, and likely hundreds of billions after, by the time we finish talking, it's going to be documented by Komment, right? We will absolutely corner this documentation market. And ultimately what we are trying to improve is developer experience and developer productivity, right? And maybe there'll be, a suite of other products that we do to go to this goal, because our mission is not document code for the sake of documenting code. That's just a means to an end. And the end is, can we make developers more productive? Can we, I've been a developer myself. I know the pain points, where are the pain points and where's the joy points, right? And Komment would be this DevX portal, right? That people can rely on and make sure that it'll drastically and quantitatively improve the productivity of their team.
I love that. Let's pin those as the final words here. But before we wrap up fully, Adi, where can people find you and the company online?
So you can go to Komment.ai, and you can also go on Komment.io, by the way, and it just redirects you. So yeah, if you go on Komment.ai, you can get to the company website, and then if you go on app.Komment.ai, you can try our product free.
And we will make sure to link everything up below. Thanks a ton for coming on today.
All right, wonderful chatting, Nicholas. Take it easy.
If you like this episode, then you'll love the SaaS Operator, a weekly newsletter brought to you by EarlyNode, with actionable insights from SaaS experts in the industry, delivered right to your inbox every Tuesday for free. Visit earlynote.com to subscribe.